Hello and welcome to Deft and Dorky. We're going to talk about Dungeons and Dragons.
Dungeons and Dragons.
Yay, we're back.
We
I've moved.
back.
I have a
It's your
different
boy.
background.
Yes. That's your new room, right?
This is a new room.
That's
I'm not sure if this is where everything's going to stay, but this is where it is for now because I had D&D sessions to do. So we got stuff set up and then it'll probably get moved again. But
man,
it's ready to go for right now.
phenomenal.
Today, we are talking about inspiration. Where do you get inspiration for things D&D related, whether it be as a DM or as a player? Um, and specifically to start, the inspiration that I and presumably you had to start playing D&D was things like Critical Role and Dimension 20. Uh, what do you have to say about those things?
Well, yeah, I like we were talking about topics as we do. And one thing that I think is big fans of those, right?
Yep.
I'm watching Dimension 20 with my wife. I listen to Critical Role regularly. Where am I at now? I'm almost all the way caught up. Um, This is super tangential, real quick. By the way, the
It's fine.
YouTube of like, hey, Sam here. I've been gone for a while. Did you watch that thing?
Oh, God, yes.
Dude, killer.
Yeah.
Oh, um, that was brutal to watch, but
Yeah, it
wonderful as
was.
well. Um, I'm on episode 96, and there are,
They just did 99.
dude, I am so close. That's crazy. Okay, um, I've never been that close to being all the way finished. Anyway. These shows are phenomenal and great, and there is a lot of cool things that you can pull from them. And I also think it's important to talk about like why your game is not these things, and why most people's games are not and should avoid elements of these wonderful, phenomenal entertainment shows, entertainment. I can call it show,
Yeah, it's a show.
live streams, whatever, how they're different, things that you should pull from and draw from, and things that we like about it and we've incorporated, and also things that I feel like I want to say, like, hey, this is not the thing to do. And so we can start with good or bad, or I don't care where we jump in, but um, let's end on a good note.
Okay.
No, you know what? Fuck it, we'll just jump around.
All right.
Sorry. Um, Sorry, kids. Um, like, as an example, like, I think a lot of people like, oh, yeah, they're so awesome. I wish it was like that. Like, one thing that struck a chord for me was kind of watching something that talked about it. Um, and just the realization, especially for me, like, I run a campaign with a very new player and my younger brother, like, his first experience in D&D with my older brother, and then my wife, who's played a little bit here and there throughout the years. Um, the Critical Role / Dimension 20 model does not work with somebody who's brand new to things. And it's just
Yeah.
like, hey, by the way, I should not expect you to dig in real deep with some intensive role play and kind of play out episodes with one another through the midst of this adventure, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, because they're trying to figure out mechanics. It takes a lot to break out of the shell to like actually perform like that.
Yep.
Like at the end of the day, like I guess like the big thing for me is that it's interesting watching those things and reminding myself that like these are mediums for entertainment, which is different than playing a game, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
both can be modes of escapism, both can be a lot of fun, but like watching something versus playing something, two very different things. And I think that some ways they can kind of overlap, and I think in some ways they should absolutely avoid one another, like the plague. So,
Yeah, and one thing that about like things like Roll 20 or not Roll 20, Dimension 20 and Critical Role is keep in mind that all those people are professional actors. They all have a good understanding of how to improv with each other, not just like improv in general, but with around each other, so they know, like, sort of, they have an idea of where to take their cues from the other players at the table.
Yeah.
So if you're trying to go in and start your first game, it's not going to be like that. I mean,
1,000%.
that was a mistake that I made in my first campaign. Was like, I did not realize how much of a driving force I needed to be as a DM in those early sessions. Just because, like, watching those, I mean, you can watch Critical Role, and an entire session can be taken up by two players interacting with each other, and the DM can have nothing to do, essentially.
Right.
Like, there are times when players completely guide the session, and I was kind of under the impression when I first started that could happen and might, was feasible to happen early, and
Right.
it is not. It is not feasible to happen early. Like, that is something that those guys have been playing together they had been playing together for years at home. And then, like, on their first live streams, you can tell it wasn't fully hashed out. I started watching in campaign 2 when that was way more of a standard for them.
Well, and I think too, like, a lot of people talk about, like, don't railroad your players and yada yada yada, and I think that, like, that is such a commonly argued point.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get what you're talking about, which is like, oh yeah, I've watched these things, and it's like awesome to see your players really take the reins and like drive the action. It's just like, I think those two elements are unrealistic and perhaps misguided to an extent. Because, like, I know for me and my group, like, I need to make sure that I am in the seat driving the bus, because my players are relying on me to present them with enough to have a good time. And like, I think I hear those two things in the back of my head, like, don't railroad, from like common community advice, and also like from what I see, and the thing that brought me into D&D, and it was one of my favorite things to do in my free time. Like, I mean, I'm washing the dishes, you better believe I'm listening to Critical Role on the podcast. Like, so I get those two things on one side of my head saying, hey, ease off as far as like DM input, but in the reality it's just like, no, like, push down, because your players are reliant, especially in like a very casual newbie setting. Like, I'm the one with the most experience at my table. I really need to lay down groundwork and go hard in order for my players to have enough pieces to play with. More so than I probably would with like a more veteran table. But even then, like, like, I think that you could be so caught up in like not railroading or like wanting your players to really take the reins that it can mean that there's just not enough for them to do,
Absolutely.
Like, I can't say it enough. Like, I feel like what's worse, right? Like, railroading a little bit, or like your players being like, I don't know what the freak to do.
Yeah, and that's a thing that I'm still trying to figure out how to sort of find that balance. Because there have been times, even in our current campaign, where you guys have not been sure as to where to go or what to do. And that comes from a very similar place of me not wanting, like, that voice who's like, don't railroad, let them explore. Mm-hmm. And then sometimes it's just there's not enough information, especially because as the DM, you know everything, but you don't realize that your players don't pick up everything that you lay down, because it's just not always easy to pick up. Like, I can drop little hints, and then if someone is either distracted by something else that's going on in their real life, or they just mishear it, or they're looking at, like, they're trying to figure out how a certain spell works on their character sheet. Like, there's plenty of ways that a player can just miss a very subtle hint. And
yeah, absolutely.
It's trying to find that balance of telling your players what they need to do to advance the plot and letting them explore is it's a delicate balance, and it's something that I still struggle with. 100 sessions in, so it's definitely a thing that it's I think is probably just going to be a constant uh, constant work.
Yeah. Yeah, or like, I laugh at all the times where it's just like, hint or clue or whatever, and they're not getting it, but like they'll latch on to something that's like it's just a chair. Yeah, exactly. It's just a chair. And it's funny because like watching Dimension 20 again with my wife, like I haven't watched all of their seasons or series. I really like Unsleeping City, which is like D&D, New York, real life kind of scenarios, and then what is it called? The Bad Kids is the name of the party.
Is that the high school one?
Monster High. No, not Monster High. Is that? I can't remember.
I don't know, I haven't seen a lot of those.
But the amount of times that like Brennan will be like, it's about this time that you guys make your way to this destination that you didn't say anything about. But like, it's funny how much ushering he'll do to keep the flow going. And there's times where I'm just like, whoa, like he basically pushed them to that place, because I don't know, there's an element of like, okay, you guys are really stagnant and need something to do. Like, here's another difference too that I want to point out is that like, this is more so true of Dimension 20 than Critical Role. They have a format where every other episode is either like an RP episode or a battle episode. And I don't think they have a designated, I'd have to look this up. I don't think they have like an exact designated amount of time per episode, but it's close. And so like there is an element of like a scripted nature in a little bit of a sense. Like it's not truly freeform. There's just like, well, depending on what you guys do, maybe you're not going to fight for like 3 or 4 sessions.
Yeah, because they have a certain amount of episodes per series, and they have to keep that pacing. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's like a pacing that they have to stick by. That like, okay, within the next 90 minutes to 2 hours, they're going to get into a fight. So it is really. It's funny because I listen to them, I watch them, and it feels very organic, but at the same time, it's just like, were they on track for this? Like, Brandon obviously had a bit of an idea. Critical Role obviously isn't that way, but like, that's one more thing to recognize is that, like, yeah, they're for entertainment, and also with entertainment comes a certain level of pacing and progress and development and, plot advancement, right? Like, I think it's funny. I don't know how you feel about this, but like, I feel like watching Critical Role when there's a shopping episode, you can like feel like a certain level of like I feel like some of the players are like, let's freaking move it along,
Yeah, it's sort of, that's the joke is that Travis hates shopping episodes.
So, and they find ways to make it fun and good for them, but like, I see that being like, well,
yeah,
what we're doing.
Yeah, and that's that. I mean, that's if your table likes it, it's great. If it doesn't, then make some changes. But yeah, like, I mean, the shopping episodes with Travis is because Travis is always like having to separate himself from his character.
Yeah.
He's like, the gamer in me wants to go to this place, but there's no reason that Chetney would want to go there.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Absolutely.
And that's just more of a pacing thing. Like, and I'm almost certain that Matt is prepared for them to go in any direction.
Right.
If they can find but it's up to them for them to find reasons that their characters would want to go to those places. I know that there's some places that he wants them to, like, as a creator, wants them to explore, but he knows that it's not likely. He had mentioned that Keyless Mom was at that island the entire time in campaign 1. He's like, but there was no reason for you to go there.
Right. Yeah.
And they found it in campaign 2. Yeah.
Yeah. Which is pretty dope. So, I guess that's another thing. Like, I'm harping on all these like things you should like avoid the temptation of doing. Like, the level of complexity and depth in the world that it was built, especially for Critical Role, like, I don't know. Like I am DMing my first big campaign right now, and I'm doing a module, and it's like very nicely contained to one. What's a
Region.
good word for it? Say what?
Region.
Region, yeah, realm, region, kingdom, and it still feels ungodly huge right now to me. It's just like, geez, there's a lot of moving parts and things to remember, and this affects this, and they're gonna go do that, and like, oh, I gotta change this up now. I can't imagine what it's like. I think they have assistant writers on Critical Role,
Oh
don't
yeah,
they?
yeah,
Like Matt has people that help him flesh out the world and do all that shit.
yeah.
Like, don't do that to yourself,
I don't
guys.
know. I don't know when they started that because I know that. I mean, I know that he has a hand in. He has a final say in whatever. And I don't know
Right.
when they started having the extra writers, but yeah, I know that that was certainly done at least by the time that EXU came out. Because
Right.
once you let someone else DM, they get the reins. So
Right. Which we can talk about this later, but I got some hot takes, dude. Not a fan of some stuff. Anyway.
I don't remember where I was going with that, but yeah, don't put that on yourself. And that's the thing that I learned in the first campaign that I ran was that try to keep where your players are smaller if possible, because because the campaign one, you guys had basically circumnavigated the globe, and it felt very hollow because, at least to me, I don't know how it felt to you guys, but to me it felt hollow because there was nothing in some of the places. There was nothing that was affecting anything else really of import. And that's why in this campaign I wanted to hold it to a region of a continent rather than yes, go all over the world.
Yeah.
Just because it feels like there's more, it feels more real because all the stuff that's there has its thumb on the scale. Whereas
Yeah.
before, when you guys were walking across the world, you would go through towns that nothing was important there.
Right. I came in later that I didn't feel that as much because we had a very like pure way of going. But I do think that is like it's funny, like there is a size to everything that you create, and it could be like you could do a whole campaign in one city if you wanted to, or you could do a whole campaign in a multiverse.
Yeah.
And like finding a way to make it feel like every step along the path geographically feels meaningful can be hard,
Very, very
like
hard.
I'm struggling a little bit with Strahd because like it feels a little bit like an amusement park where it's just like you guys get to choose what rides you get to ride on, but how are the rides related to each other? You know what I mean? Like
Yeah, and that's part of storytelling, right? Like
Yeah.
in reality, yeah, you're going to go through places that have no effect on you. That's just the nature of space and time. But in a story, it's very rare that you. In fact, I would venture to say that never in an actual like well-written book, you're going to see them mention a town that just they're like, and this is this town. That's all you get of it.
Yeah, no. If it's good, everything will have meaning.
Yeah.
Like it's like why waste words?
Exactly.
You can't afford to do that.
Yeah, and that's I mean that's I feel like that's the aim for at least for me when writing a campaign. I know that it can't be it's I can't hit that aim every time, but that's the goal.
Yeah, it's funny. Like sometimes I feel like is this a cohesive place or does it feel like a Mario Party setup where it's just like
Yeah, and now
This
it's
is-
a mini game.
yeah, now it's a mini game and this is Lava World and now you're in the Jungle World and now you're in,
Yeah.
map 8-2 or whatever, like have fun in Desert Land, So it's really, I don't know. Anyway, bringing it back to this kind of stuff, it's just like and this is kind of the same point as the first one that we made. Like these people are professionals who have made this their full-time career to work on. Like, none of us are doing that. Like, we don't have the same skill set potentially. Some of us might be good at some elements of it or whatever. But like, how many of you guys are playing D&D and you've made it also your 40 to 80 hour work week? Like, so. The last one that I wanted to kind of point to, I touched on this earlier, but like, the difference between creating something for consumption in a viewing or listening format versus creating something for consumption in a playing format, I think is really interesting to me.
Yeah.
Like, Critical Role, Dimension 20, these things have actors and performers, and your home table does not have those things. It has players.
Mm-hmm.
And you could argue, like, well, in Critical Role, they're playing. It's like, yes, that's true, but the aim of the product is to broadcast it and to share it with others, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it could be argued that the aim of Matt's product is for his players.
Right.
But ultimately, the reason it is successful, the reason you're watching it, is because it is viewable. It has enough going on from every person at that table that it is interesting to watch. You're not going to always get that from your home game.
Yeah, and perhaps it's better to say this, like, because I like it, and I want to be able to say that, like, no, they're genuinely playing it and having a good time. Like, I believe that. But there is an added layer of they are performing. Whereas, like, at our home, like, that's not what a lot of us are doing. Like, there's not that component to it, and in fact, the priority is, for a lot of people, entirely about the game. Mm-hmm. And I think that there is a difference between a game and a movie. A game, I mean, it's the same thing. Like, this could be a conversation about video games versus books and television, right? Mm-hmm. Like, all of these are entertainment mediums, but like the way that we interact with them and the way that it shapes us and the contributions that we make to it, very different.
Yes, so absolutely. And that kind of goes into another one of the points that I wanted to talk about in this one, which is when you take inspiration from stuff at least as a DM, and try to sort of make that into your world, it is important to keep in mind that you are telling a story collaboratively, meaning that you are not writing a book, so you don't have control over every dialogue and every choice that every character makes. So you can't necessarily make like Avengers Infinity War because your players might not do the same thing that the Avengers do. And when they go and make those, make those changes, you have to be ready to roll with it, in which case it can become something completely different. You can set up whatever you want to set up and try to aim for that. But whenever it has been my experience through, reading things and even playing, that whenever you have a certain way that you want something to go to match your story as a DM, and you are unwilling to let player agency change that, it sort of sours the experience for everyone, DM included, because then the players don't feel like they're doing anything, and then, as at least for me as a DM, makes me feel bad that like I have not done a good job.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to pull on that thread too a little bit more, because like in my last session I ran into this issue where like it's so weird that the head games that you play as a DM that are really unnecessary, but they exist. Like, something I don't want to do is come across as like too like, oh yeah, your idea, it works. Like, that's a cool idea, it worked. Like, I want to be nice, or I want to be kind of running with things. Like, providing an environment that has a challenge involved, where like like, oh, cool idea, player, it just automatically is going to be good. Like, I don't want to do that. But like, I play this mental game of like, I had this scenario that I developed. You guys are solving it in a certain way. It could potentially circumvent some of the other content that I've made. I like what you did. I want to reward that. I make you roll for it against my roll, and I won. but I still really want you to feel like, hey, I'm in the driver's seat. Like it's just such a mental head case of like,
Yeah, and that's that's something that's. I mean, just with this last boss battle in our current in the campaign we just did,
dude,
the like there's I feel bad whenever you guys like spend spell slots and it doesn't work the way that you think it would want to
right?
work. But I'm like, well, but I can't just give you I can't give it to you. It's
Yeah. It's weird. You really have to like establish rules for yourself as a DM,
yeah.
like to say like this is the scenario, and these are the categorical ways, and at the same time be flexible enough to be like you know what I mean? Like if you've ever worked with other people, like in a group dynamic, like you should know that like you're not gonna have all the answers, and someone's gonna provide a solution that is creative and unique and that you never thought of.
Hmm.
And the same is true for D&D. Like you have to like simultaneously establish rules for yourself as a DM to say like if X then Y, if Y then Z, and if Z then 72. Um, being willing to be flexible enough to take that when it comes to you, but also at the same time like you said, like hey, like I made this boss so that he's impenetrable to this specific thing, or like you came up with this cool thing, but I already thought that like hey, he's immune to this, or you know.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, because it always feels
it's
bad
tough.
when your players like burn like their high level spell slots or their stuff that they when they use their resources in a daring way. It's like if this
Hmm.
doesn't work, I'm going to be significantly hampered. And there's
Hmm.
that as they're doing it, there's no chance it's going to work.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel great. Like,
No.
but at the same time,
But
like what I
but
can't. It's you have to learn that, I guess.
that's part of it. Yeah. Like can we as a specific example, getting into the weeds here. It's funny. So for those listening in the campaign, if you're not watching along, we went to this place. We're getting ready for the big bad final boss fight, etc. My character has a family member that's involved in this like ritual scenario where he's going to be willingly sacrificed for the greater good of the evil guy plan. Um, we kind of stealth into this scenario, and I underestimated how far geographically, physically we were from where we needed to be. And so we initiate combat, and I take off straight for the door to get to my family member. And it results in like, no, it's 300 feet away or whatever. And I'm like, okay, so we're in combat, and the next 3 turns or 3 or 4 turns of my combat is going to be me dashing every turn. That's it. Um, so it was kind of like one of those experiences where as a player I'm like, well, I'm committing to my choice, but it means that my turn is going to be like I move, I action dash, next turn.
Yeah.
Um, I wanted to highlight that and contrast it against what happened tonight because I thought it was really interesting. I'm playing a wild magic sorcerer, and tonight there was an instance like I finally make it the 300 feet to this basement ritual chamber. Awesome. I have like 1 or 2 turns in this combat that's evolving, and then I have an wild magic surge where I turn into a teddy bear or something like that.
Yeah.
And can I tell you like how different it felt? Like it was so different because like I was telling my wife about it tonight. So she's like, "So did you have another session where you weren't really doing a lot?" And I'm like, "It felt so insanely different, and here's why. One, from the beginning of the game, I chose Wild Magic Sorcerer and knew that that could be a potential outcome. I also chose to run down this 300-foot flight of stairs or whatever, but it just kind of like there was definitely a different feeling in the fact that I felt like I have known, like in that instance, I knew in one session, like, oh, that's how long it would take to get there. But I've known for a year and a half, the entirety of this campaign, that like I could potentially kill myself on one of these wild magic surges. It could happen. And so like there was this weird, it speaks to this point. I promise I'm getting back to it. as a DM, it does suck to see your players go through that, but like I was thinking about it today with my work. Like sometimes having confidence in the rules and the policies and just being transparent and standing and saying like, I'm not going to be nice. I'm just going to tell you that this is how it is.
Mm-hmm.
Like people, I think, respond better to that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like just tell it to me straight kind of attitude. And so it felt like, you know what, fine. And we still found creative ways to roll with it. You know what I mean? Like I was kind of excited. Like how can I problem solve my way out of this scenario? It was a very, very similar situation, but very different feeling to it. And as a DM, I'm sure it probably felt like, well, Brian's not going to do anything again.
I thought, oh no, as soon because you rolled the magic table that we use, he rolls a d20 and then a d100, and the d20 he rolled equated to this is going to have more consequence than if he had rolled a different number. And I was like, oh,
it's like a severity level, right? This high severity. Yeah. So I imagine in that moment it was just like, last time Brian just did a bunch of running, and this time Brian is going to be literally inanimate.
Mm-hmm. I did know that Aid was like, that's his whole subclass is based on nullifying magic. So I was like, oh, he has an out. It's just going to take like a turn or so.
But I was like, I was thinking, hey, there's other ways we could solve around this too, potentially, you know? Mm-hmm. But very different feeling, and I think it stands from, like, I had an understanding fully that, like, okay, I picked this subclass, and that means these things. Whereas, like, in the session before, like, you had to describe this experience to us, like, on the fly and in the moment, because I imagine that you probably didn't expect us to, like, approach it the way that we did. And so, like, I am presented with this information that I have to do, like, right then and there. But, like, if you're a DM, like, another example is, like, I'm going to use a 5th level spell. It's save or suck. If it doesn't work out, like, that's your turn. Sorry. But, like, you're not, as a player, like, you're picking that spell knowing that that could be the outcome, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, and what you running down the stairs, I thought, I would have to go back. There was obviously a missed lines of communication there at some point, because I had described how when Joe was asking how far away it was, I was like, well, it's down here at the bottom, and then there's another 300 feet.
Yeah.
And that, I guess, that got missed somewhere, and then you started running, and I was like, well, it's still 300 feet.
Well, and I stand behind the choice that I made regardless of how far it was. Like, Jace is gonna, like, go for this. Like, I know that you set up a combat that's up there, but, like, my family member is potentially going to die any minute. I'm going to
and that. It led to hilarity in the next one, when there was there was the fight down in the bottom with the big bad guy, and then there was a completely separate fight with one player and one guy that you guys had left up there in the stairwell.
Just like,
so we got to go back and forth, which I found great.
It was pretty cool. It is like a, you know, trusting the process is so important, because, like, if you're a player, like, one of the reasons that you play this game, like, it should be like, hey, bad things will happen and you got to figure your way out of it, or just like bad things will happen and you got to feel your way out of it. Like, that's part of the game. Like, if you don't like it, go play Floober Doober, you know? Like,
Floober Doober. How dare you knock Floober Doober?
Go play Hello Kitty Island Adventure. You know what I mean? Like, if Elden Ring or, like, Demon Souls is not your cup of tea, like, D&D is definitely not going to be your cup of tea, because, like, dying is an eventuality. Failure is interesting, you know? You're going to roll a 1 from time to time.
Yeah, and honestly, like, I think that the failures are way more interesting than just having success all the time.
Yep. So much so, tying this back into our topic, do you know Brennan's, like, I can't remember what he talks about. He uses a die for certain instances, a d20, but instead of 1 through 20, it's 1, 1, 1, 4 through 16, 20, 20, 20. Or 4 through 17, and then 20, 20, 20.
Okay.
So he's increased the odds of a crit fail or crit success
Success,
dramatically.
yeah.
And he'll utilize that die in certain instances where it's just like, okay, what you want to do is so batshit crazy, we're going to use this die. Because either it's going to be phenomenal or it's going to be phenomenally terrible. Or it could be somewhere in between. But like what you're suggesting is so insane that like
The
there
odds
needs
of
to
those things
be
should be,
yeah,
should be
right?
enhanced.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Which is cool, which I think is kind of a cool idea that if you want to incorporate in your games, like you should. So let's pivot to that. Like you had mentioned like wanted to talking about like some of the things that you have liked to borrow from like Critical Role or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Um, yeah, the man, I can't even think of a specific example right now, but like the the Nanamori thing where they did the trust building exercises or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I had considered trying to take that and make it a thing, which it I don't even remember which came first now, but that was it felt similar to me to Ivia's dungeon because there's all the encounters were very specific and they weren't just kill the thing before it kills you. They had different objectives. So I think I actually came up with that before I saw that on Critical Role, but it did make me like stop and think, oh, that's cool.
Yeah, I'll just say I love that, and I like the idea of just like it's again like D&D is a game, and if you want to add some levels of like real like tangible feelings of game to your game, that sounds so dumb, but you should like that Nanamori thing. Like it was literally like, yeah, let's for a session or two, like they're doing like. It felt like mini games. It felt like Mario Party mini games. And it's like that's kind of fun to use once in a while. Like you should incorporate that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's I guess one of the things that I took from Critical Role was they had like they've gone to carnivals and done like the literal carnival games.
Yeah.
Which I mean there have been different variations of that in different books and stuff, which I've also used. But in the first campaign we did that. And I was like, it's Carnival, and they got Carnival games, and then, it's really fun for low-level characters. It's less fun for high-level characters because there's like very little chance of failure, which is what makes it interesting. But
find ways to do shenanigans.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Those things are great. One of the things, like as far as taking inspiration, is. So I'm sort of piecing together a world that, I'll just give a for example. So if you know of a like book or play or a movie or even a song that describes a world, like you can use bits of that you like. And incorporate it into your world. Like, I'm trying to think of a good example. Yeah, I'm coming up blank for some reason. But you can, if you were to take, like, I hate to do this, but if you want to take Harry Potter, you can absolutely take elements of that. Like, you can take what's it called? Where they go and shop for their school supplies?
Diagon Alley or whatever it is.
Diagon Alley. You can absolutely take that bit and throw it into your game and have it be something cool. Like, this is where all the wizards and sorcerers and stuff come to get their components for their spells, and each like little you can have multiple little shops in there that each have their own sort of flavor. And that can just be a cool thing that you can do. That you can add to your world, which I think is great.
So my table, nobody watches Critical Role.
Okay.
And I can't help but think that like somebody like Matt Mercer would not just be totally thrilled if he found out that I was borrowing like even like word for word copy of some of the things that he's done. Like, do you remember in Critical 2, Campaign 2, like one of the things that I ripped off, like I'll just call it that, like the algae that was responsive to like fire or
Oh
whatever
yeah, yeah, yeah.
when they on the like I was like that is such a freaking cool idea, and so I used it as an idea in my own campaign where it's like no, I created a series of tunnels or whatever that was specifically had that in there, and it's like it's just such a cool concept, and I'm like I'm ripping that off, and they're never going to know because they're not going to watch 100 episodes of Critical Role Campaign 2 before they like remember that or whatever.
There are
And
definitely
even if
things
you,
I've lifted just straight from it and put in because it's such a good idea. Like
yeah,
it's
and why not? And if you do have players that know it, like, don't you think that they want a chance to like, yeah, that's really cool. And I thought it'd be cool if somebody tinkered with it in that way. You know what I
Mhm.
mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like,
And they like every. I've heard Matt Mercer say it. I think I've heard Brennan Lee Mulligan say it. I've heard almost every like famous DM has said we're all just ripping off of each other. Like it's
yeah, there's only like
everyone
20 something original
sees
stories.
yeah everyone sees what everyone else is doing and they're like I like this part of that idea very much. I'm going to use it in a very you can use it in the exact same way. You can use it in a similar way but change one thing. Like it's all
Yeah.
there's only so much you can do. I mean, there's infinite you can do, but there's only so many interesting things you can do.
Right. The facade of like creative originality is such bunk. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Like,
Yeah, absolutely. And it's yeah, there have been things that I can't think of anything specifically off the top of my head right now, but there have definitely been things that I've taken straight from Critical Role and maybe changed like one thing about it.
yeah.
But yeah, it's like there's too many things that are super cool that you're like, man, I would have loved to encounter that if I was a player. And you're like,
Yeah.
you know what? I'm just gonna throw it in my campaign.
Mhm. Like one thing that has made my DMing better is like some of the things that these players do. Like in Dimension 20, they have like the Box of Doom roll.
Hmm.
And so for like really big rolls, he brings out this like it looks so
Yeah, that crappy little like dice tower thing.
yeah. And it's got like a camera in it so you
Yeah.
could like see what it is. But like I now like to like okay, on certain circumstances, I'm going to very like okay, we're going to pause. We're going to roll openly for this and you need this DC to do it. Like
Hmm.
I don't tell my players the DC for some things very often, but when
Yeah.
it's just like this is a pivotal moment, I want you to know. Like that's one more way that you can kind of take the sting out of like those like high pressure scenarios where if a player fails in your mind, like if they know from the get go, you need to beat a 15, then they're not upset. Like when it's just like, oh, I rolled a 14, maybe that's good enough, and it's like, sorry, not good enough. And you're like,
Yeah.
oh, that feels very arbitrary. That you just knows that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Absolutely. That's why a couple times tonight I was like the DC is 17 because I feel like especially with like the really the big boss battles, it always feels like nope, not high enough. It feels like you're just making stuff up. But it's like no, it just I have it written down. So sometimes I like to say no, this is a DC 17 or whatever, so it doesn't feel like I'm just making up numbers all
Yeah.
the time.
And that's, I mean, that's hard to balance too, because like this is the big bad, and so I'm just like, you know, I shouldn't even bothered with protection from good and evil, because like he's gonna have a plus double digits to hit, you know. So like even with disadvantage, he has to roll less than a 6, you know, or a 5
Yeah.
to like miss.
Well, I mean,
Which is kind of a fun.
it would have potentially saved Saturn from a thing, but he rolled a high enough wisdom.
He beat the
save
DC
anyway.
anyway. Yeah. I are there other like it's funny kind of thinking about this. Are there things that you've like specifically like DM techniques or like rules that you like from them that you've borrowed from Critical Role?
I mean, the bonus action as a healing potion, I think everyone has
Mhm.
borrowed at this point. They may have borrowed it from someone. I don't know. It's just been one of those things that seems to be universally used.
You
But
do
that was the
his
first
like
place that I saw it. So
yeah, you do his resurrection rule, right? If I
yeah,
remember
we
right.
haven't come across it yet, but I had talked about it to you guys before we started campaign 2.
Yeah.
We were going to use that, which I think is really cool because it's
It is super cool.
whenever you have a player death, it's like, oh, it doesn't matter. I'll just resurrect them. There's
Yeah.
no, like, there's no, because resurrection is a thing, there's no penalty for death, essentially.
Hmm.
So, yeah, Wade talked about it, and I decided that would be, it makes it to where it's like,
Yeah.
as a healer, which I played in Michael's campaign, there was no reason for me to heal someone until they went down.
Hmm.
Because
Yeah.
it was
Even
more
the
efficient.
system. Yeah. That's the game. Yeah.
Yeah. So when you use those rules, though, like, ooh, if they go down, though, they might die, and then they might be permanently gone. Whereas before, it's like, oh, they might die, but I'll just bring them up. Doesn't matter.
Right.
But yeah, so I do like that. And then I can't.
As a
Go ahead.
specific about that as a player, something that I feel like I borrowed from Critical Role, especially the amount of times that they use a healing spell,
Mm-hmm.
to me, like it's super inefficient the way
Yeah.
that they'll use their healing spells. But it also feels like a genuine like act of caring. And so I've been like, you know what? Yeah, I'm gonna cast Cure Wounds more often in moments that it doesn't matter, because if I had the ability in real life to cast Cure Wounds, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go to the hospital. Like my Saturday, like Cure Wounds, Cure Wounds, Cure Wounds, Cure Wounds, Cure Wounds. And even if it doesn't do that much, like I'm not gonna wait until my friends get knocked out to like cast Cure Wounds. Like I am going to. I don't know. It depends on the kind of game that you're playing, but like that's something that I really appreciate and like so much about them, is that they're just like they're not going to get into a battle. In fact, it's set up that this episode is trending towards a long rest anyway, and it's like, you know what, I'm going to cast Cure Wounds on you because like that's just what, you know, FCG would do in that moment. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
So
And that's, I guess,
but
that's a sort of rules thing that I'm looking to. Oh, there's a siren outside. Who knows where that's going? There's a the long rest rules. I'm thinking about, if we do another campaign or when we play it, that I'm thinking about going back to just a regular long rest rules, just because it's like,
um,
if I really like the idea of at least having an expectation or at least some kind of idea of when you're getting your next long rest, so you're not saving everything you have,
mhm.
and then because that's like some of the fun is like being able to use those spells whenever.
Yeah, yeah.
And then if you're always saving for efficiency, it feels like you're taking away something.
That's something I've talked to my wife about, like watching Liam play Orem.
Mm-hmm.
Like my wife in our campaign is playing a fighter, and I'm like, every fight you need to use Second Wind and Action Surge, and you will feel like a god. And stop trying to save it, because like you just get it back so quickly. I've started doing that with Jace now too. I'm just like, why am I hanging on to level 5 spells? Like, guns blazing. Like, let's go. Like, you know what's fun? Like getting those. You know what's more fun? Using them. I'm just like, who cares? Like, we had an instance going into this place where I was just like, you know what? Theming. Boom. Narratively, that was a cool decision, and I stand by it, even if in the moment we're like, well, maybe we should have talked about this first, Brian. And it's just like, yeah, but like,
But
we've
look at
talked
us.
about crap to death. You know what I mean? Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Like, check us out. But anyway. So,
Yeah, it's. I mean, yeah, that's all as far as rules and stuff. There's like so many different little tweaks you can make that can be good or bad for your table. Just feel it out.
yeah.
But yeah, and then taking inspiration from a player's perspective, dude, watching Liam play.
Yeah.
Like I never. Okay, so campaign 1 it was different. Like they were not. There was a lot more. How do I say this? They had just switched from like Pathfinder, I think. So there was a lot more like rules discussion in those early episodes because not everyone knew. Because they tried to convert some of the items over from Pathfinder to 5e, and some of the stuff didn't fit exactly. So Matt had to make some rulings that you could tell some of the players were upset with because they had worked a certain way before, and now they're working a different way.
Right.
But I mean, overall, they got through it and it was fine. But when you watch campaign 2 and more of them know how the rules are going to go, and they can set those rules aside,
Yeah.
play their characters.
Yeah.
Watching, like, wizards are cool, but watching Liam play a wizard
Yeah.
was so much cooler. And then, like, fighters, when I heard he was going to play a fighter in campaign 2, I was like, oh no, I don't want to watch him play a fighter. Fighters are lame to RP in fights. And then watching him do that, RP as fighter in fights, I was like, that's so cool.
He really, that is one of his strengths. He just brings that to the table. If you don't know, guys, if you don't listen to Critical Role, like, he plays a fighter, and the way he describes every one of his turns, it's just like a virtuoso. Like, he's just like, yeah, my character, like, you know, he leaps through the air and he pirouettes and he takes a second, you know, and he just describes every detail. And one thing I feel like I appreciate too about him that I want to try to incorporate more is that like everybody tries to have, I mean, hopefully you're trying to be prepared for your turn, you know, so like you're ready for what's happening. But like I really feel like he has like written his script, and if he needs to adapt on the fly, he can. But it's like, all right, Liam, you're up. It's just like, all right, Orm springs into action. He's gonna do these things, and it's just like, who talks like that, man? Unless they've like premeditated it. Like it's just, oh gosh, dang, it's so much fun to watch.
Yeah, what's so weird about it is like he does all this description, but never am I like, oh, get on with it. It's always like it's succinct enough to be good and still descriptive enough to be interesting. And like, I still think that the wizard is better, but him doing that with a fighter was still just top notch. But the way he would describe casting spells with his wizard, he went through the book, found out what the different components are that are listed for spells that nobody cares about because they don't matter. And he incorporated them into the way he would describe casting spells. And like the motions, like he would like, I take the sulfur and grind it through my hand, and that's how he would cast Firewall. So then when he would say stuff, like he would talk about the spell components, the people watching like for long enough would understand what he's about to do, and then you get to listen to him describe it, and it was lovely.
It is so cool, especially because like, you know, it's like we said earlier, like when you're writing books, when you're writing content, when you're writing a script or whatever, like you don't, if it's gonna be good, don't throw away any word, you know. And like D&D, I think it's a pretty, you could tell the people that made it really cared about it and spent a lot of time thinking about stuff, maybe too much time. Because when they're like, yeah, okay, certain spells have components, it's like, well, nobody pays attention to that. But like, not only was just like, yeah, you know, like Caleb pulls out the whatever and casts it, and it's just like, no, he slaps bat guano and sulfur together and there's fireball. Or like he pulls out this like, I can't remember, like invisibility is like an eyelash or something, or like
gum Arabic or something.
Yeah, gum Arabic, and he like describes like how the gum Arabic is used. Like, yes, I mean you already said this, but it's just, it is. I echo how cool that is.
Yeah.
So. You know, it's funny. I started this off by saying like, hey, they are entertainment venues and these are professionals, so don't expect that it's going to go that way, right? Like your table's different. I will also say though that like if you like Critical Role and you think your players do too, like I think it's fair to be like, hey, like if you want to ham it up, like go for it, you know? Like
there's a fine line between not expecting it. You can still aspire to it, right?
Right. Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
Yeah, I'm not. There's no way I'm ever going to be Matthew Mercer, but that doesn't mean that's not what I'm aiming for.
Yeah,
like, I can still try, and it's that trying that sometimes gives you like really fun moments. So
absolutely,
it's the same thing with anything. Like if you're trying to become a football player. No, you're never going to be Justin Jefferson. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't try to be. It just means like know your expectation and know what you can, set your goals, but know that you're not always going to reach every one of them.
Yeah.
Part of the journey is in the trying.
Right. Yeah, I had a colleague told me something just like a similar metaphor. Like, not everybody is going to make it to the NFL, but like, there's a lot of people that still are in the stadium. Like, if you want to, from like owner to like marketing team to the lawyers that negotiate those contracts to the people that are working the concession stand, like,
Yeah.
you can still be around that product. So I agree. Like, I think if you like that stuff, like, be a leader at your table and be like, all right, yeah, I'm gonna do a voice, and like my fellow players might laugh at it and be like, what are you doing? And it's just like, no, I think it's kind of cool. Like, I want to do this, and so if it's something that you guys are cool with, I'm gonna do this dumb accent. Sure, but like, I do think that it sets a tone and it helps. Like, okay, yeah, take this. He's doing it. Maybe I can too. She's taking a gamble. Like, maybe they can as well. It's
Yeah, absolutely. That's whenever I first played in Michael's campaign, I was the only one doing a voice, and I was like, I don't care. I'm gonna do it anyway.
yeah,
Because I
absolutely.
guess Joe had done one for a while, but no one else was doing it.
Hmm.
And then so when I came in and started doing it, now he's gone back to doing a voice, and even Eric has gone to doing a voice at this point. And
Yeah,
it's fun. It's fun for me, whether everyone else joins in or not. It's still fun
right.
for me to be like, whenever I'm speaking in character, I'm using this voice, and whenever I'm
Hmm.
speaking above the table to people, not characters, I'm using my regular voice. That's a fun way to differentiate for me, and then just doing the voices is fun. I enjoy it. It
Yeah,
makes me
it
have fun.
it's helpful both in person and online to have voices,
Yeah.
like their accents. So
Even if it's just this stupid, goofy voice. Like,
yeah,
part of the fun for me in doing those goofy voices is finding out what those goofy voices sound like when they're solemn or when they're
right.
sad. Or,
Yeah.
like, that's interesting to me. Like, if you
Hmm.
have a super goofy voice and suddenly they're sad, what does that sound like?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Man. Yeah. You're probably not gonna be Matt Mercer and do the voice for all these different things, but at least you can. It's like, that's another, like, I do go back to this. Like, that's the difference, is that like when it's your table, like, you're playing a game. The primary purpose is fun.
Hmm.
You know. But are you having it? Then keep doing it. And if it's fun for you to have a similar setting as Critical Role, then go for it. But yeah,
Yeah, I mean, there are even books you can buy to where you can actually use the same setting.
yeah, absolutely. And I meant setting as in like the way that they play.
Gotcha.
You know what I mean? Yeah.
Vibe.
Um,
We'll call it
the
vibe.
vibe. Yeah, exactly. So yeah,
All right, so yeah,
well, cool.
have fun playing D&D. Do what you want to do. Take inspiration where you can get it. Set Don't set your expectations too high, but don't be afraid to try to reach beyond your expectations.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I'm a better DM for watching those things, and I'm a better player for watching those things too.
I
So
absolutely am. Like,
yeah.
after that's my no one. I couldn't find any campaigns to play in.
Hmm.
So I asked, Joe and all them of the first campaigns, like, if I DM, would you guys play? And they said, sure. So I was like, all right, let's do this.
Yeah. Let's do
And
this.
I had watched enough Critical Role to basically absorb most of the rules. So
Honestly, like, yeah, I remember hearing Brennan talk with somebody about it, and they're like, if you've watched like our first, like, if you've watched 10, 12 episodes of any of these, like, you know how to DM. Like, you don't need to read the books. Like, like, you can get the vibe of what to do enough to DM, and it helps obviously to go through the materials.
yeah, obviously, the more sort of exceptions to rules you can see,
Hmm.
the better equipped you will be for when certain other exceptions come up. But yeah,
Totally.
the general, what happens in most cases, you can get pretty quick.
Oh. Critical Role, Dimension 20, cool stuff. Similar things to it,
You bet.
cool stuff. But
So yeah, have fun, play, watch people play if that's your thing.
yeah, yep. And figure out
Alright.
how it's the same or different
Yeah.
for what you need. So
All right. Well, thanks for chatting with me. Thanks everyone for watching, and we'll see you next time.
goodbye.
Bye.